Hello everyone, welcome to another episode of No Frontiers Japan. My name is Luca and today we're reacting to One Piece's episode 4 in their live action series on Netflix, and it's called The Pirates Are Coming. Alright, so now I have a lot of very strong opinions about this episode. I'm going to be honest and say this is my least favorite episode by far. Now I understand One Piece, there's only so much you can do in the live action, there's a lot you have to cut out, like a lot that you have to cut out. But at the same time, the whole reimagining of One Piece, you have to do it in a very specific way. And when you're crafting new scenes, if you go too far away from what the original story, even if the core concept is the same, I'm not going to like it as an original One Piece fan. If you're someone who's watched the anime, then you might also have an issue with this. If you've never seen the anime or read the manga, then maybe you just love it the way it is. But for me, this episode was just a little bit too Hollywood. So before we get into why it's too Hollywood, I just want to talk about this scene that connects to an issue I had with the previous episode, where Zoro is conked out on the back of the head by one of the cat pirates. And so at the beginning of this episode, he wakes up in the well. Somehow he's been supplied with a hook on a rope. I don't know how he got that, and he's trying to throw it so he can pull himself out of the well. That's really random. He doesn't bring it with him afterwards. He's never had that rope before. I've never seen it. Where did it come from? What is this hook? So if you're familiar with all of One Piece, you'll know that it's a very common trend where either usually it's Luffy or Zoro is incapacitated somehow, or they're kind of removed from the picture, or they get stuck somewhere. And the big reason is because they're both very powerful characters, and it's kind of unfair if they're just going to be there anytime there's conflict. So the show always has to and the story has to kind of remove them, get them out of the picture to let some other characters shine. So I'm okay with Zoro being in the well, just the way it was done with the hook and trying to climb out and falling, and then they're putting his backstory over top of that. I thought it was a little bit weak, to be honest. So as Zoro is trying to escape from the well, his backstory is overlaid, and at that time, I have an issue with the casting for Zoro. Not as much for Kuina, she was good, but it's not an acting performance, it's just the age of the character. I know it's very difficult, especially with actors, to find such a young child, but with the original story, Zoro, when he is growing up, it's not like 7 years ago. It must be much more because he was tiny. He was so small. He's so much smaller than Kuina. And for me, the reason that's important, and I'm not being picky, the reason that's important, because we know that Kuina, she says, guys will surpass her. It doesn't matter about the skill at that current moment in time. Just because of physical attributes, she doesn't like the fact that she's at an inherent disadvantage being a woman. Right? And that really, really is important because when she gives that speech to Zoro at that time, he's not taller than her. He's not a similar height. Zoro is like this tiny little boy with huge green hair. And he's just like really, really aggressive and really energetic and really stubborn and extremely competitive. A big speech for her to admit that to him because of his physical stature. Though I did think the actor did a great job when he found out that she passed away. I could really feel the sadness and I could see that on his face. So I thought that acting part was great. The next important scene for me was actually between Usopp and Kaya. This scene I really liked. The acting was great. The synergy between those two characters, you could really feel their history over the years, their relationship, their kind of clandestine relationship, and the emotions between them was really, really palpable in that moment. That was fantastic. I really loved the slap. When Kaya slapped Usopp, that was great. Now I'm going to get right into what for me is the elephant in the room, and that is their decision for the story for this episode. It's very different from the original. The main idea is the same, the outcome is very similar, but this whole concept of locking people in the mansion, where did that come from? Are we talking about some kind of cheesy C or B horror movie? Is this kind of like The Purge? I don't know what the hell was going on. So out of all pirates in One Piece, to me, Klahadore is one of the most scary, not because of his bounty, not because of his power, but because of the decisions that he makes and the willingness he has to wait a long time and put a long plan into action. That's really, really scary. He literally poisoned Kaya over years. Over years he poisoned her and infiltrated her life so he could obviously get an inheritance and then he could kill her at the time once she reached that certain age. And that's very scary because in One Piece, well, in general, I think pirates are quite impulsive. Now, of course, there are some that are very manipulative, some that are very scheming. We'll find out about those ones later on. But in general, they're very impulsive. They say, gold, boom, I'm going to attack, get it. And if I die trying, well, that's the pirate life. But in his case, He's not like that at all. We find out later from his discussion with Luffy during their fight that Klahadore, he doesn't like the fact that he had a bounty put on him and that bounty was growing. He doesn't want to have a target on his back. That's very different from Luffy, who said he just wants adventure. But Klahadore doesn't want to live in fear looking behind him. That's a big reason why he actually made this plan. He faked his death. That's why everyone thinks that Axe-Hand Morgan killed him. But it didn't happen, right? Is Klahadore supposed to be a cat who's playing with his food? That's why he's walking slowly through the halls, scratching the walls? Is that what he's doing? Like a cat playing with its food? I mean, maybe, I guess so, but he's been waiting years for this, and the frustration that's built up inside of him, I think he would just want to get it over with and make sure there's nothing that goes wrong, especially because it's not just him and Kaya, but he doesn't want to take any risks. So that is an issue I really had with the story. So actually my favorite scene in this haunted horror house with a creepy serial killer that was really weird and really didn't feel very One Piece. But I did like the scene when Klahadore is in the room and you've got Kaya hiding under the table with Usopp and Nami. That was a really nice scene because you could really feel the great acting where Klahadore expressed his frustration. He was so frustrated, how much he hated Kaya, spending all these years as a butler trying to accomplish his plan, his goal of taking over. And you could really feel the hate that and the resentment that he had for her. And then on the other side of the coin, you've got Kaya, who's under the table, and she's hearing all this for the first time, but not from Nami or Usopp. She's hearing it directly from Kuro himself, or from who she thought was Klahadore, the butler. And the betrayal and the sadness that she feels knowing that he's the one who's been poisoning her, that he's the one who, when she felt he was her ally, it's the opposite of that. So the betrayal contrasted with his resentment of her in that moment was really nice, so I can forgive the whole cat and mouse game which they were playing, which is fine, but yeah, I don't know. Okay, yeah, maybe a cat and mouse game was actually appropriate, but not locking people in a house in this lockdown. I didn't like that. I didn't like that at all. Sorry. If you disagree, tell me in the comments. Also Zoro's scene, fighting Bucci and Cham. Bucci and Cham, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I have to be honest. Bucci and Cham, they look terrible. Their skills were not good. They're really badass in the original story. Zoro does defeat them, so that's accurate, but their fight scene, to me, yeah, it was just, honestly, it was really weak. And we also missed out on a great moment where you really see what Kuro's all about. His story about not wanting his identity revealed. His identity revealed. Kuro actually tries, once he gets the help of his crew, he actually tries to kill them because he does not want anyone to know what his new identity is. He doesn't want to go being Kuro the Captain Pirate again. No, he uses people so he can get what he wants. And then and then probably the funniest scene was actually, so Zoro's escaped from the well and then Luffy's being carried off by the Marines. Well, namely Helmeppo, Kobe, and then a few other Marines. And then they're bickering, and especially Helmeppo is being Helmeppo. And then you hear a noise, and then he turns around and Zoro, his worst enemy by now, is there. He's already taken out the Marines very silently, and then punches Helmeppo in the face. So if you don't like Helmeppo, that would have been a very satisfying scene. I really like that. And for the first time, Luffy says, meat, or in Japanese, oniku. That's something he says a million times. I have to give a great big congratulations to Usopp. It's not in the original story, but Usopp getting a kiss from Kaya. I think any guy will let that slide. Good for him. He waited years for that. Alright, and then in just a couple quick scenes to round out the episode's recap, we had Usopp who drew his Jolly Roger. That's very accurate. I liked it. He obviously wants to be the captain, so I'm glad at least that they introduced that aspect, this kind of constant struggle. Well, it's not really a struggle. Of course, Luffy's the captain, but Usopp, that's his nickname, is like Captain Usopp. So I like that they also really showed that part. And then we have the bombshell at the very end, when Luffy sees Garp and says, Grandpa? Now you'll know why in my second episode I asked why is Garp British or Scottish if he's Luffy's grandpa. So the British man is the Mexican man's grandpa. I guess One Piece live action is just very international. If you enjoyed this instant reaction, then if you wouldn't mind considering hitting that like button, that really helps me a lot with the algorithm. I'm going to get to work immediately on episode 5. Wow, episode 5. We're already halfway through the live action. Kind of sad. But anyways, we'll get to work on that right away, so please subscribe, and I'll see you very soon, right here on No Frontier.